Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, friends, and anyone who has ever found themselves shouting at the television during a daytime chat show, good evening. I stand before you today not as a journalist, not as a television producer, not even as a casual observer of British popular culture, although I have been all of those things at various points in my life. No, I stand before you as someone who was actually there, in the studio, on the 14th of October 2025, when the ITV program Loose Women, a cornerstone of midday scheduling for nearly 26 years, experienced what can only be described as its Pompeii moment. The day the volcano erupted, the ash cloud rose, and Sir Rod Stewart, national treasure, gravel-voiced rock legend, and wearer of the tightest leopard print trousers known to man, was escorted from the building after what has already been dubbed the most explosive 8 minutes in the history of daytime television. Let us begin, as all good stories should, at the beginning. It was a Tuesday, unremarkable in every way except one. The Loose Women panel that day consisted of the regular roster you would expect in the autumn of 2025, Denise Welch, returning triumphantly after her much-publicized wellness retreat in the Algarve. Janet Street Porter, armed with opinions and a walking stick she insists is purely decorative. Nadia Sawalha, who had promised the audience a recipe for low-calorie baklava, and Colleen Nolan, mediating as only a Nolan can. The guest list had been teased all week. First, the woman who went viral for knitting an entire wedding dress on the London Underground, and then, in the second half, Sir Rod Stewart, there to promote his new album of swing standards and, more importantly, his whiskey brand, Wolfies. Rod arrived in high spirits. I was standing just off camera, close enough to smell the blend of equity Parma and single malt that follows him like a loyal dog. He kissed every woman on the panel twice, continental style, called Janet darling in a way that made her blush for the first time since 1983, and settled into the curved sofa as though he had been born there. The audience adored him from the moment he waved that famous spiky blonde mop in their direction. Everything, for the first 4 minutes, was exactly what ITV had ordered: warm, nostalgic, a little bit cheeky, entirely safe. Then Denise Welch opened her mouth. Now, let me be clear. Denise Welch is many things: a fine actress, a passionate advocate for mental health, a woman who has never met a boundary she couldn't vault over whilst holding a glass of wine. But she is not, by any stretch of the imagination, a diplomat. Denise had decided, in the green room, over a cup of peppermint tea and what she later described as a moment of clarity, that she was going to ask Rod Stewart the question that nobody in British media had dared ask him in public for at least 15 years. She waited until the conversation had drifted, inevitably, to the topic of aging gracefully in the music industry. Rod was in full flow, talking about how at 79 he still does the high kicks, still fits into the same trousers he wore in 1978, still has hair that defies both gravity and good sense. The audience was eating it up. Nadia was nodding so enthusiastically I feared for her neck. Colleen was about to ask him which of the Loose Women he would most like to see in a kilt. And then Denise leaned forward, placed both hands flat on the table like a poker player about to reveal a royal flush, and said, "Rod, forgive me for being direct, but don't you think it's time we had an honest conversation about the amount of work you've had done?" You could have heard a Botox needle drop. For a second, maybe two, Rod Stewart simply blinked. The blink of a man who has heard every question under the sun, from "Do you really sleep in separate bedrooms?" from Penny? To "Is it true you once bought an entire Highland village because you liked the pub?" But who had never, ever been asked this on British daytime television. Not like this. Not in front of 200 pensioners from Solihull eating complimentary custard creams. The director in the gallery, I am told, whispered a single word into the talkback that cannot be repeated in polite company. The floor manager's face went the color of corned beef. Rod recovered first. He always does. He let out that raspy chuckle that has closed 1,000 deals and opened 1,000 bedroom doors, and said, "Darling, I've had more work done on this face than the M25, but at least I admit it." The audience roared with relief. Crisis averted, or so we thought. But Denise Welch was not finished. Oh number. Denise had the scent of truth in her nostrils, or perhaps it was the peppermint tea repeating on her. She smiled that smile that says I have been in recovery for years and I fear nothing, and pressed on. "No, but seriously, Rod," she said, "don't you worry that you're setting an unrealistic standard for men of a certain age? I mean, the hair, the skin, the broken bar, everything. Some might say it's a bit, well, desperate." The word hung in the air like a bad chord. Desperate. Rod's smile did not falter, but something behind the eyes shifted, the way it does when a man who has survived the 1970s music scene, 3 divorces, and Celtic Football Club realizes he may finally have met his match. He placed his glass of Wolfie's whiskey very carefully on the table, looked Denise dead in the eye, and said, "Let me tell you something, Denise love. I've been desperate since 1963. Desperate to get on stage, desperate to get laid, desperate to stay relevant. And if paying a man in Harley Street to iron out a few wrinkles keeps me desperate enough to get out of bed in the morning at 79, then I'll keep doing it till they bury me in the bloody leopard print coffin I've already commissioned." The audience erupted. Half of them were cheering the honesty, half were gasping at the visual. Janet Street Porter barked her approval like a sea lion that had just been thrown a particularly juicy fish. But Denise, God love her, doubled down. She said, and I quote verbatim because ITV Legal has already made me watch the tape 17 times, "That's all well and good, Rod, but some of us prefer to age like a fine wine, not like a painting that's been left in the sun and then frantically restored every 5 years." At this point, Nadia Sawalha tried to interject with the baklava recipe. It did not work. Rod Stewart stood up. He did not stand up quickly, or angrily. He stood up slowly, the way a man does when he realizes the party is over and he no longer wishes to be in attendance. He was wearing a navy blazer with gold buttons the size of saucers, white trousers so tight they could have been painted on, and shoes so shiny you could see the studio lights reflected in them. He looked, in that moment, like a glorious, furious peacock. He said, "Denise, I came on this show as a favor to my mate Colleen. I've known her since she was in short trousers singing with her sisters. I thought we'd have a laugh, talk about the old days, maybe shift a few bottles of whiskey. But if you want to sit there and insult a man who's been paying taxes in this country since before you left Coronation Street the first time, then you can do it without me." And then, ladies and gentlemen, he did something that will go down in the annals of television history alongside Christine Hamilton slapping Jarvis Cocker's bottom and the time George Michael swore "Live on Terry Wogan." He took the glass of Wolfie's whiskey, raised it to the audience in a mock toast, and said, "To all you lovely ladies out there watching at home, keep wearing what you want, keep shagging who you want, and never let anyone tell you you're past it." And Denise? He paused, looked her up and down with the wearied disdain of a man who has seen every trick in the book. "Next time you feel like judging someone else's face, have a look in the mirror after you've taken the filter off." Then he downed the whiskey in one, placed the glass upside down on the table like a gunslinger holstering his pistol, and walked off the set. He walked off. Live on air. The audience did not know whether to clap or cry. Some did both. Janet Street Porter shouted "Bravo!" so loudly the microphone picked it up and feedback squealed across the nation. Colleen Nolan sat with her head in her hands, muttering "Oh my God, like a woman who knows her Christmas card list just got complicated." Nadia abandoned all hope of baklava and simply stared into middle distance, perhaps wondering if this was the moment her career peaked. In the gallery, chaos. The director cut to a hastily prepared VT of Rod's new single, but the tape operator was laughing so hard he pressed the wrong button and the nation was treated to 30 seconds of the knitting woman on the tube before someone wrestled control back. Back in the studio, security had been called, not because anyone thought Rod was dangerous, but because ITV protocol demands it when a guest leaves the set without permission. Two burly men in black polo shirts appeared just as Rod reached the fire exit. He turned, gave them the sort of grin that once made Maggie May a global hit, and said, "Lads, unless you're here to carry me to the pub, you're wasting your time." They let him go. Of course they let him go. This is Rod Stewart we're talking about. The man has played to 90,000 people at Copacabana Beach on New Year's Eve. He has survived the Brit Awards in the 1990s. He has been married to Rachel Hunter. Two ITV security guards were never going to stop him. He was met outside by his driver, a man who has clearly been through this before, and was whisked away in a Bentley the color of clotted cream before the tabloids could even get their photographers across the South Bank. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the moment the internet caught fire. Within 7 minutes, the clip was on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and something called Be Real that I don't pretend to understand. By tea time, #Rod Walks was trending higher than the Prime Minister's latest scandal. By the One Show, Denise Welch was giving tearful interviews to the Mail Online insisting she had been provoked and that Rod had stormed off like a toddler. By News at 10, Rod was on the phone live from his private jet, en route to Marbella, telling Hugh Edwards that Denise Welch couldn't handle the truth and that he stood by every word. The next morning, the newspapers had the best day they'd had since Partygate. The Sun went with Hot Rod blown out, complete with a picture of Rod pointing accusatorially and Denise open-mouthed in shock.